There is a certain kind of silence that belongs only to the forgotten. Not the comfortable silence of a summer evening, or the holy silence of a moonlit forest. No, this silence is heavier. It presses down on your chest like a stone. It follows you through every hallway, wraps itself around your shoulders at every meal, and sits beside you in the dark when the rest of the world has moved on to brighter, louder things. Serafina Vale knew that silence better than she knew her own heartbeat. She had been born into it. The Iron Moon Kingdom was the most powerful wolf territory on the continent, a vast, ancient dominion that stretched from the frost-bitten northern cliffs all the way down to the amber-soaked southern plains. Its castle stood at the center of it all, a fortress of black stone and silver-veined marble. Banners the color of midnight and gold hung from every tower. The pack that lived within those walls numbered in the thousands, all of them ranked by a sacred hierarchy. At the very top sat the Alpha King. At the very bottom sat the Omegas. And even among the Omegas, Serafina Vale sat lower still. She was 18 years old, slender in the way of someone who had missed too many meals. Her hair was the color of dark copper, wild and thick. Her eyes were a strange, unsettling shade of silver that made people look twice and then quickly look away. There was a scar along her left collarbone, half hidden beneath the collar of her gray Omega tunic, a permanent reminder of a night she had never spoken about. She worked in the castle's lower kitchens, waking before sunrise and going to sleep long after midnight. She did not complain. She had learned early in life that complaints from an Omega were called insolence, and insolence had consequences. But there was something about Serafina that she kept very, very carefully hidden. Something she had been keeping hidden since the age of 12, when it had first announced itself to her with a white light so blinding she had screamed into her pillow. She had no idea what it was. She only knew that it was dangerous, that it was wrong, that an Omega with any kind of power was an impossibility in the Iron Moon Kingdom. And impossibilities in this kingdom were not celebrated. They were eliminated. So she kept the light buried. She kept herself small and gray and forgettable. She lowered her eyes in every corridor and thanked the moon goddess quietly every night that no one had noticed her. And for 6 years, no one had. The morning everything changed began like any other morning. Serafina rose in the gray pre-dawn, splashed cold water on her face, and pulled on her work tunic. She slipped out of the Omega dormitory before anyone else awoke. The castle corridors were beautiful in the pre-light silence, torches casting the black stone walls in warm amber. She was halfway to the kitchens when she heard them. Voices, sharp, excited, overlapping. A flood of ranked wolves came around the corner. They were talking fast, animated in a way she rarely saw. Returned last night, apparently. Arrived before dawn. 3 weeks early. Something happened in the Northern Territories. They're saying he killed 4 rogue alphas without shifting. Without shifting. Can you imagine? Serafina heard only fragments, but fragments were enough. There was only one person whose early return could generate this kind of electricity. He was back. The Alpha King. Kale Draven. She had seen him exactly twice in 3 years, both times from a distance. She remembered thinking that the paintings in the Great Hall had done him no favors by being accurate. He was exactly as severe as his portrait suggested, tall enough to dominate every room. Dark hair, a jaw like something carved rather than grown, eyes the color of a winter storm. He wore his authority the way other men wore skin, effortlessly, completely. He was 24 years old and had been Alpha King since he was 17. In 7 years, he had expanded the kingdom, defeated rival bloodlines, and implemented a pack law system so sophisticated that even human scholars came to study it. He was also, by every account Serafina had ever collected, utterly without warmth. Not cruel, exactly, just absent. As though the part of him that was supposed to connect to other people had been surgically removed. She pressed flatter against the wall as the cluster of ranked wolves passed, letting the current of their importance wash around her. None of them glanced in her direction. When they were gone, she exhaled. He's back. She told herself it meant nothing. His returns and departures were the castle's rhythm, not hers. She went to the kitchens. They were already in controlled chaos. Head cook Brenda, a stout beta woman, was directing the organized madness. The kings returned early, Brenda announced to the room. Which means the welcoming feast is tonight instead of next week. Which means we are approximately 700 years behind schedule. Move, and everyone moved. In the heart of the powerful wolf kingdom, I moved like a ghost, chopping, stirring, carrying, scrubbing. My name is Serafina, and my life was a cycle of chores in the castle kitchens, unnoticed and unheard. Around me, the other workers buzzed with gossip. The Alpha King, Kael Draven, was back from the Northern Territories after a rogue attack. And with his return, the whispers grew louder about one thing: the Luna selection. The Luna selection. The event that would choose a mate for the unmated, 24-year-old Alpha King. The Pack Elders and the High Priestess Marin were pushing for it, desperate for stability, for an heir, for a Luna to anchor the Pack's spiritual connection to the Moon Goddess. I kept my face blank, scraping vegetable peels into the compost. The rumors said King Kael had ignored their pleas for months, treating Pack politics like a game he'd already mastered. But his sudden return, the rogue attack, the immediate summoning of the High Priestess, something had shifted. None of this concerns you, I told myself, again and again. I was an Omega, a kitchen worker. My world was stone floors and hot stoves, not royal courts and Luna selections. So I went back to scraping vegetables. It was mid-afternoon, and I was on my least favorite task, hauling 30-pound supply crates from the lower storage tunnels up to the kitchens, 6 trips up a narrow, winding staircase. My arms burned, sweat trickled down my temples. I was on my 4th trip, eyes glued to the top step, focusing on just getting there. I rounded the final landing and slammed right into a wall, except this wall was warm, and it moved. I stumbled back, losing my grip. The crate fell from my arms, tipping sideways. Jars of preserved blueberries and bottles of dried herbs tumbled out, shattering against the marble floor. A fragrant, sticky explosion of glass and spices and sweet berries spread across the pristine corridor. My heart leaped into my throat. I grabbed the railing to steady myself and looked up, straight into the storm-gray eyes of Alpha King Kael Draven. I had never been this close to him. He wasn't in his royal finery, but in simple, dark traveling clothes, flanked by 2 of his personal guard massive alphas in black armor. It was clear he was using this back corridor to avoid the main thoroughfares. His gaze drifted over the destruction on the floor, the spreading puddle of berry preserves, the shards of glass. Then, slowly, his eyes moved up, past the mess, to me. His expression was a complete blank. No surprise, no annoyance, not even a flicker of recognition. It was a flat, assessing look that lasted maybe 2 seconds, an eternity. And then, without a single word, he stepped around the broken jars, stepped around me as if I were just another piece of furniture, and continued down the corridor with his guards. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't acknowledge my existence beyond that brief, dismissive glance. He just passed. I stood frozen on the landing, my breath caught in my chest, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading away into silence. My pulse thundered in my ears. He was gone. I slowly looked down at the mess. 6 jars of precious blueberries and 4 jars of rosemary oil, now a glittering, sticky ruin on the floor. A mess I would have to clean. A mess that was a stark reminder of just how invisible I was. He didn't even see me. To the Alpha King, I was less than nothing, just an obstacle to be stepped around. The sting of that realization was sharper than any of the glass shards at my feet. Little did I know, that brief, meaningless encounter was not the end. It was the beginning of everything. A single spark in the darkness, about to ignite a fire that would consume us both. Because the moon goddess works in mysterious ways, and sometimes she chooses the most forgotten souls for the greatest destinies. And my destiny, it turned out, was intertwined with the one man in the kingdom who didn't even know I existed. The rest of the day was a blur of cleaning and quiet humiliation. The other kitchen staff tutted and gossiped about the mess, but no one mentioned the king. It was as if the encounter never happened. I scrubbed the last of the sticky residue from the marble, my knees aching, the scent of rosemary and blueberries clinging to my clothes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those storm-gray eyes, that utter lack of recognition. It wasn't anger or pity I felt, but a strange, hollow ache. The feeling of being completely and utterly insignificant. I was a ghost in my own home, a whisper in a kingdom that roared. What was the point of a heart that beat if no one ever heard it? The next day, the castle was electrified. The High Priestess Marin had made an announcement. The Luna selection would begin at the next full moon. But this time, it would be different. The moon goddess, she declared, had sent a vision. The king's true mate was not among the high-born alphas and betas of the allied packs. She was already within the castle walls. A hidden gem, waiting to be discovered. Panic and excitement rippled through every level of the castle staff. Every unmated female, regardless of rank, was to be presented. My heart hammered against my ribs. It couldn't be. Omegas were never considered. We were the lowest rank, the workers, the silent cogs in the great machine of the pack. To be a Luna, one had to be strong, a leader, an alpha, or at least a high-ranking beta. Presenting an Omega was unheard of, a farce. Yet the decree was absolute. Every unmated female, that included me. The thought was so absurd, it was almost laughable. Me? Serafina, the girl who broke the jam jars, the girl the king looked straight through? Stand before him as a potential mate? It was a joke. A cruel, impossible joke. But as the day of the presentation drew closer, a tiny, forbidden flicker of hope I hadn't felt in years began to stir in the deepest part of my soul. What if the goddess really did see the unseen? What if the ghost was about to be given a voice? The stage was set, and against all odds, I was about to be pushed onto it. And the king who didn't know my name was about to be forced to look at me again. This time, he wouldn't be able to just step around me. In the kingdom of Eldoria, where the scent of an Omega marks them for servitude, Serafina was a ghost. She moved through the grand halls of the royal palace unseen, unheard. Her own faint scent of rain and earth, masked by a bitter potion she drank each morning. To be an Omega was to be a possession, a prize. But Serafina was more. She carried a secret, a power that pulsed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat, the ability to manipulate shadows. It was a forbidden's magic, a death sentence if discovered. Her days were a blur of polishing silver and scrubbing floors, always with her head bowed, her eyes downcast. But one evening, her carefully constructed world shattered. She was delivering a late supper to the king's private chambers. King Kael Draven. The name alone was a thunderclap. He was the alpha of alphas, a warrior king whose power was as legendary as his temper. His scent, a potent mix of pine and winter frost, preceded him, a physical force that made the air crackle. As she entered, the heavy door swung shut behind her with a deafening click. The king wasn't at his desk as expected. He was standing by the window, a silhouette against the dying light, his broad shoulders tense. He turned, and his silver eyes, sharp as a hawk's, landed on her. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. He was more imposing up close, a mountain of muscle and authority. "You," he growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones. "Come here." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She moved forward on trembling legs, placing the tray on a nearby table. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but she was trapped. He stalked towards her, his gaze intense, analytical. He circled her like a wolf inspecting its prey, his sharp scent making her head spin. "I don't know your scent," he murmured, his voice dangerously close to her ear. "Who are you?" Panic clawed at her throat. The potion, was it failing? In her terror, she lost control. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, stretching like grasping fingers towards the king. It was a flicker, a momentary lapse, but he saw it. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise in their silver depths before they narrowed in suspicion. What was that? He demanded, his hand shooting out to grip her arm. His touch was like lightning, a searing heat that shot through her veins. The raw power of an alpha overwhelmed her senses. Desperate, she wrenched her arm free, stumbling back. "Nothing, Your Majesty. The candlelight. It flickers." Her voice was a weak whisper. She curtsied low, her eyes fixed on the floor, and backed out of the room, not daring to look at him again. She fled down the corridors, her heart a frantic drum, convinced her life was over. For the next few days, Serafina lived in a state of heightened fear. She avoided the king's wing of the palace entirely, taking on the most menial tasks in the kitchens and laundry, trying to lose herself in the crowd of servants. But she felt a new, unnerving presence, a pair of eyes that seemed to follow her everywhere. It wasn't the king. This gaze was different, quieter, more calculating. It belonged to Prince Lucien, the king's younger brother. Unlike Kale's overt power, Lucien was the shadow to the king's son. He was the spymaster, the keeper of secrets, known for his sharp mind and observant nature. He was often seen in the libraries or walking the palace grounds, always watching, always listening. And now, it seemed, he was watching her. She'd catch him at the end of a long hallway, his dark eyes fixed on her before he'd melt back into the alcoves. Once, while she was tending the gardens, she looked up to find him on a balcony overhead, his expression unreadable. He wasn't threatening, not in the way Kale was. His presence was a quiet question, a puzzle he was determined to solve. He knew she was hiding something. The suspense was agonizing. One evening, exhausted and on edge, she sought refuge in an abandoned storeroom deep in the palace cellars. It was her secret place, the one spot she felt she could breathe, where she could let the shadows play around her fingertips without fear of being seen. She closed her eyes and let her power flow, weaving the darkness into intricate patterns in the air, a silent dance of forbidden magic. A soft click echoed in the silence. Her eyes flew open. The door creaked shut, plunging the room into near total darkness. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint light from the corridor. "I knew it," a smooth, calm voice said. "The shadows don't just flicker around you. They obey you." It was Prince Lucien. He stepped into the room, his face partially illuminated. There was no shock in his eyes, only a chilling, triumphant certainty. He had cornered her. He had seen her secret. Her magic sputtered and died, the shadows retreating as icy dread washed over her. But before she could even beg or run, a sudden piercing howl echoed from the upper floors of the palace. It wasn't an animal. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. A king's roar. Kale. It was a sound of discovery, of a hunt beginning. Lucien's head snapped up, a frown creasing his brow. "He knows," Lucien whispered, his eyes locking onto hers. "He knows what you are." At that moment, Serafina understood. It wasn't just Lucien who had been watching her. The king hadn't dismissed the flicker of magic in his chambers. He had been investigating. He had been testing her. And now he had his proof. The howl echoed again, closer this time, followed by the heavy, running footsteps of the royal guard. They weren't just coming for a servant who had displeased the king. They were coming for a sorceress. They were coming for her. Serafina looked from the calculating prince in front of her to the locked door behind him, the sounds of the hunt growing louder with every passing second. She was trapped. Two brothers, one who had discovered her secret, and one who would see her executed for it. Her time of hiding in the shadows was over. Now, the shadows themselves might be her only chance at survival. What will happen to Serafina? Will she escape the palace? Or will the Alpha King capture his prey? The story has just begun. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of this thrilling tale. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.